This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, welcome to the show. I've got one of my favourite all-time guests, another chat with Bill Steer to share with you. Now the catalyst for the conversation is due to an Australian tour featuring Carcass and Black Dahlia Murder, which is happening in April 2024. I will put all of the dates and a link to tickets in the episode description. Of course, we discussed the tour, but this chat is far more notable because it was an opportunity to dive into the deep past. We talk about Bill's involvement in those two absolutely classic, rancid classics, the Napalm Death albums, the ones that launched it all, Scum, and also From Enslavement to Obliteration. And of course, then we talk about Carcass, the early days, Symphonies of Sickness, Reek of Putrefaction. There you go. I said it right. Didn't quite get it right in last episode because that's how I remember it being putrefaction from when I was a young fella. Necroticism, Descanting the Insalubrious. We dive deep into the past. We go there. So this is a chat for the old school fan, the one that was either there or the one that appreciates the past. So here he is, one of my faves, Bill Steer. You must know this by now, and I think I might have asked this of you before, but do you feel the love? Do you feel the popularity of the band down here?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I do an interview for Australia, I guess you tend to get the impression that, there's a fondness for the band, yeah, for sure. I mean, as you mentioned, I did a couple of interviews the other week, and it was just very positive. Very, very upbeat, and I guess it seems like people are ready, as we are, for us to finally get over there and do some gigs again, because it has been a number of years.
Yeah, it has been. You're almost, Dice is the best in the business, by the way, so whatever his judgment is the best judgment, but you could almost play regional centres at this point, such as your popularity. So have you guys even talked about, say, playing in Byron Bay or Geelong or other places outside of the major cities?
No, I mean, that's the kind of thing I'd be really up for. I mean, I guess, we sort of rely on the local knowledge. So, like, Brad is over there in Perth, but, travels all over Australia. And I guess what we have currently is what he feels is, practical. But, yeah, God, I would be very curious to play some of the slightly less, smaller, less obvious locations in Australia. Yeah, I mean, that'd be amazing. Because, I haven't seen that much of the country, really. None of us have.
But you lived here for years, though, didn't you? You're a Sydney side, weren't you?
Well, yeah, I was only there it was really a matter of months. I think it was like 7 months uninterrupted. I sort of went back and forth for a while. But that was the longest stretch where I didn't leave. And, I loved the place. And prior to that, I had spent some time in the Melbourne area, Richmond and so on. So, I've definitely seen a bit of Australia, but, I've never been to the Northern Territory, for example. That's something I'd love to do.
It's bloody hot. Yeah, my wife's family's up there, and we've copped it. The only thing I think you'll cop a little bit of is that I know you're coming in April, but it's been unseasonably humid, and humidity is just, you go troppo, the old saying, a little bit, and I know some of the bands have been talking about it from stage. I've been going to a lot of shows because we've had a ton of them lately, but some of the groups have been talking about it, so hopefully it cools down just a touch for you to feel like as though you're still in the tropics but still not sweltering up there on stage.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, yeah, because, you know how things are here. We've still got, constant rain and grey skies and low temperatures, so... I guess we're stealing ourselves for the exact opposite when we go down there.
Yeah. Is this bookended with tours of Japan or the Philippines as well?
Well, yeah, after Australia and New Zealand, we are going to Japan. That's the only place in Asia for now, unfortunately, but still, that's always really quite a special thing to do. And then after that, we go directly to Central and South America. So we'll be away for, I think it's about 7 weeks in total.
Oh, wow. A random question. How do you pack for such a long trip?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really valid question, because I was just asking myself that. You can never get it right, you know.
Yeah.
There's always, I mean, it's actually quite easy to take too much, if you know what I mean. Like, you think, I just need all this stuff. And then after a couple of weeks, you realise, you know, it was unnecessary. You should have left some space in your bag for things you might acquire on your travels, you know. So, I don't know. I mean, it's weird after all these years. I still haven't got a proper system or anything. But I suppose I'm a little bit better now than I was, you know, when I was a kid or whatever.
I did the same thing when I went to 70,000 tons in Miami. So it took 22 hours or longer, I think, to get there. And then I bought all of these T-shirts thinking I was going to be getting hot and sweaty during the day. But, mate, it was like 12 degrees or something like that in Miami when I was there. So I wasn't exactly...
Wow, God, I wouldn't expect that at all.
No, it was less than half the temperature if you go by the by Celsius. So I bought all of these clothes and I didn't have to bloody wear them. So consequently, I was carrying bags with me when I was on the aeroplanes and stuff, and it was shit on that front. On all my recording equipment on top of it as well, because I was interviewing on the boat as well. So it's you can, how many black T-shirts are the one thing I noticed you can buy anywhere. So there you go.
That's true. Yeah, there's no shortage of those.
Hey, just with the set list, you've got so much you can pick from. So, is it something that you have to give a lot of thought to? Like, do you have to go into? Do you and Jeff have to go into Spotify and get the analytics and work out what's been trending lately?
God, no, I hadn't even thought of that. That's funny. I mean, we have got one or two guys in the band who pay attention to Spotify, but not in that kind of detail. I think they're just curious to know, you know, what the numbers are in terms of how many listens the band has had in general. And I guess they've been kind of extra curious because they've noticed off the back of certain tours, the numbers go up quite heavily. So I guess that's when, you know, a couple of us started to pay attention or pay more attention to Spotify. But in terms of the set list, no, it's not. It's really not that calculated. I mean, how can I put this? There are those of us in the band who'd like to change it up a lot, and then there are some who just are quite happy to keep it the same. So it's like a tussle between the two kind of positions, and so I'm just happy if we can, you know, get a slightly less obvious number into the set at some point. That's quite nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always tricky because, as you mentioned, there are a number of albums to pick from, and you do want to represent every era of the band. So, you know, you never get it fully right. I don't know if that's possible, but I mean, we've definitely done our best to at least, you know, acknowledge each album we've done.
Yeah. Do you still get those? I definitely fall into this category. I'll out myself now, but that just wish that you played Necroticism from start to finish.
Well, I think years back there was this is some point since we reformed, but a long time ago. There was a European festival, and I remember being told, there's some kind of arrangement where we're expected to play that album in its entirety. I really don't know what happened there. I mean, I'm guessing it was something like that was asked, you know, something was asked of Jeff, and he sort of went along with it. But then, you know, in practical terms, that was just never going to happen. We didn't have the time to go into that kind of detail, because some of that stuff is extremely difficult to play and was never played live at the time either. So in the end, we played most of the record and like played parts of some of the trickier songs. And to be quite honest with you, nobody noticed. So I don't really know what to make of that. We didn't have one single complaint.
Holy shit! Yeah. Well, what about even going further back, From Enslavement to Obliteration? Has a promoter or an agent ever asked yourself, Lee, Mick and Shane if you consider performing that album in full at a festival?
Not to my knowledge. No. I mean, I'd have to say the chances of that happening are extremely slim for just a whole host of reasons. I mean, mostly practical reasons, but, you know, there's whatever other stuff that's not worth mentioning. But, I mean, I'm really not aware of anybody, from that side of things, promoters or whatever, asking for an older Napalm lineup to reconvene. I think really what we've seen in recent times is the power of the brand name.
Yeah, exactly.
People are quite happy to see the band with that name, and you might have a handful of people who are a little bit more obsessive that preferred a certain era or whatever, but most people are just quite satisfied to see the present band that goes under that name.
Yeah, I've noticed that before. Well, it's hard not to notice it. I probably should frame it. And I watched the Melvins the other night supporting Mr. Bungle? I guess it's a double header in some ways, but you've only got Buzz Osborne there, and you've got the bass player from Red Cross and Matt Pike's drummer from High on Fire doing that work there now. Yeah. So they did a great job, but it's just not the Melvins that I grew up with, if you know what I'm saying.
No, totally. But I guess as we all age, these things are happening more often. I mean, Carcass, for example, is quite far from the original lineup now. So I totally get it. If some people say, well, this is not for me, it's not the lineup or the vibe or the sound that I got into. I mean, I can see that because things just change and develop over time.
I feel like as though the legend that is Scum is growing every year. Are you getting that impression? I know it goes in cycles, but are more and more people asking you about that album?
Not at all. I mean, it rarely comes up, if I'm honest.
Shit. Okay. Yeah, I might be showing my legacy there. Yeah, with that album though, did you write a lot of the songs on that one?
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, I'm only on side 2 anyway.
Yeah.
That lineup was quickly assembled. I think I'd met Lee briefly once before we recorded. It was that kind of hasty, the whole thing. But yeah, Mick Harris had written the stuff on the B-side. I think he'd written practically all of it on his 2-string guitar at home. I think I might have chipped in with one number. I mean, it's so hazy now, but I would say confidently that most of it's him. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever play live with Justin Broderick?
No. I mean, I remember seeing that lineup. Justin and Nick and Mick Harris. I thought it was fantastic. I was a big fan of the group at that time, and I suppose when people talk about the original Napalm lineup, that's the one I'm thinking of. But I guess it's all about when you get into a group, isn't it? Usually that's where, that's the most important lineup, is the one that you first encounter. In the same way like the James Bond syndrome. I mean, some of us first saw Roger Moore, so he was the guy. But then older people would say, well, no, it's Sean Connery,
Yeah, just to go back to something you've already mentioned, I'm genuinely surprised to the point where I'm shocked that people aren't talking to you about an album like Scum, because I get sent tens, maybe certainly in a month, hundreds of albums in a month that sound like that, and to a lesser extent from Enslavement, because your guitar playing did a big jump in terms of the technical side of it, and you could start to hear that you were emerging into where it went on to the Curse, and then of course Reek of Putrefaction. As a kid, I used to call it Reek of Putrefaction, and
lots of people did.
Reek of Putrefaction. I'll get it out eventually, but you remind me of like your talent on the guitar. It just seemed to grow and grow to the point where by the time Heartwork came along, you were probably you're certainly in the same league as a Trey Zagtoth, no doubt, including maybe, it might be heresy to some people who will hear this and disagree, but maybe even more influential in many ways. But do you feel like as though, was your evolution as a guitarist, was it as intentful as what it sounded? And I hope that question makes sense.
That's a tricky one, really. I mean, I think, to me, like someone like Trey is a, kind of incomparable, really, because he's such a unique player. He created a whole kind of world with the music he did with Morbid Angel. And I definitely have heard, it feels to me like I've heard more bands and players imitating that than what we've done with Carcass. But I could be wrong, but just that's what I've sort of observed. But with the sort of the evolution thing, I think really it was just probably the biggest kick up the arse was going on tour with Death in 1990, and then seeing how good they were as players. We were just reaching for something that was out of our grasp, with the Necroticism album, but we just wanted to do something that was a little bit more, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word sophisticated, but I guess we were just trying to stay ahead of the pack, because already there was a lot of bands coming through, tuning very low, having lots of blast sections, and it felt like we were going to get swamped in that, and we were already starting to listen to other types of music, and especially going back to things we liked when we were younger, like new wave of British heavy metal or Thin Lizzy or whatever it might be. So all of those things happened around the same time. So I guess that's what that was what was driving that type of development in the playing.
I've shared this with you in the past, but I'll mention it again. I'll never forget Ralph Santola telling me that he and Chuck used to watch you side of stage as you were warming up, as you were doing your sound check. They used to watch Carcass specifically for your playing.
Oh, wow. Cool. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, it's a heck of a thing. And that's what I'm referring to with regard to the influence and the legacy that your playing offers. And in particular, and I've mentioned this before, and Blabbermouth and some of the other outlets have picked it up, but your influence, and yours and Michael's really, I should say, too, with Necroticism over the Swedish scene. Because there are a bunch of bands playing some fairly noisy death metal stuff, and then Necroticism came out, and you heard that it wasn't a right-angled 90-degree shift, but it's certainly going down a path that you guys have forged. Is that something you've given a lot of or any thought to lately? Has it come up in conversations with journos?
No, I mean, there was a period when it came up a bit. I guess, people were kind of... Occasionally people were attributing the Gothenburg sound to maybe Heartwork. I mean, I don't know, because I guess some of our guys know some of the At the Gates guys, and I'm not really aware of them being particularly into Carcass, but I guess you do hear an element of Heartwork in some of that sound, not specifically them, but like some of those bands that came along in a couple of years afterwards, simply because we were playing a lot of the harmonies and thirds. And I think prior to that, probably it was quite standard to play everything in fifths without wanting to get too technical.
Yeah,
because it just sounds a little bit more evil, and third sounds a bit sweeter. And at the time we did it, there were some people who were just kind of turning their nose up and saying, well, this isn't brutal anymore. But we also did notice some bands doing similar things, just in a different way. I mean, I haven't heard anything that sounds exactly like Heartwork, where someone's completely ripped it or anything.
Symphonies is a bigger jump. It's a bigger jump from Reek to Symphonies than I think it was from Necroticism to Heartwork. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, in terms of the first record is just, it's so shambolic, it's just outrageous, really. We were gutted at the time. It was such a disappointment. But now, all these years down the line, you can kind of see it and enjoy it for what it is, really. But yeah, you're right, things tightened up for the second record, so it did feel like a huge jump at that time, yeah.
What was it a long auditioning process to bring Michael Amott on board?
Oh, we really weren't in a position to audition anyone. I mean, it was such a small scene. There was such a small pool of players to draw from. So Michael just appeared in somewhere in southern England. I think it was one of those big indoor hardcore festivals like down in Ipswich. And it was peculiar because he spoke the Queen's English, very, very exact received pronunciation, which, none of us knew anyone who spoke like that, So, he really stood out. And it soon emerged that Mick Harris had invited him over from Sweden to join Napalm, and he just hadn't told any of us. So this was kind of weird, but everyone really liked the guy, and I think he stuck around for a while and stayed at different people's places. I think he definitely stayed at my parents' house for at least a couple of days. And my position was like, I definitely would want to be in a band with the guy because I think we jammed at it, and there was definitely he was a good. You could see he was a really good player, and there was chemistry. We had similar taste in music, but to me, the vision I had for where Carcass was going, that was something that needed a second guitar. Whereas to me, the Napalm thing was always on the edge of like, what's the word? I mean, it wasn't chaotic as such, but it was like there was so much fast music going on and so little in the way of like slower parts or dynamics. I just couldn't see room for a second guitar in the way that Carcass would, and we subsequently did with the second and third records onwards.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I left it with him, and he really didn't want to join Carcass. I mean, Napalm was kind of, not a big deal, but it certainly had a reputation.
Yeah.
In the scene, Carcass was kind of like a joke. Like a lot of people didn't really like that first record. But when we did the second record, suddenly people started to take it more seriously.
Okay, gotcha. Well, it does hint at something else, okay, in terms of the evolution of things, because I don't know whether people realise this, but Reek of Putrefaction, God, I'll get it out again, that came out before From Enslavement to Obliteration. It was a couple of months.
I guess it did.
Yeah, but it did. And you were in both bands.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, actually. I mean, because I guess everything happened with the first Carcass album very quickly, because when we were in the studio recording what became side B of Scum, I remember Dig Pearson from Earache, him asking me, "Oh yeah, you've got this other band, haven't you?" And he seemed curious, so we sort of kept in touch about that, and pretty much immediately he was sort of offering us an album deal, which we gladly accepted, but we kind of knew we weren't ready. I mean, Ken had been playing drums for a matter of months at this point, not years. So, and the rest of us were kind of scrappy as well. So, we weren't ready to make an album at all, but we weren't going to, deny ourselves the opportunity if someone offered it to us.
Yeah. And do you feel as though the Curse EP, actually, that's a question I've always wanted to ask you about Digby. Was that an obligation you had to Earache, that EP, or is it something else?
And which EP, sorry?
The Curse EP, the Napalm Death one?
Oh, I don't even know which one that is.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. It's one that...
Yeah, I mean, the last... I mean, the way I remember it, the last thing I did with Napalm was the Mentally Murdered EP. Well, some people see that as a mini album or whatever. That's the last thing I can remember doing before the whole thing kind of fell to pieces.
Yeah, check it out. The Curse EP. You're listed as playing guitar. So there's the Curse as a song on there. Musclehead, Your Achievement, Morbid Deceiver, the re-recording from. So
wow, what format was this?
So I can tell you, it's serial number is 7 Mosh 8. So the Mosh thing, the Earache. Things. It was very early on. September 1998, the EP. Yeah. So I'm just trying to see.
Oh, okay. So yes. I mean, that's like obviously something that came out much later. Then, if it's 98. Yeah.
No, it's 88. So it's a 7-inch. Yeah, no, it's a 7-inch. Yeah, it's got. I think Max must have been influenced by it because he repurposed the album cover for or something similar. Anyway, it's got the young little girl in Vietnam who's been napalmed on it. You remember that one?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that one, yeah. I didn't know it existed either, to be honest with you. I'm not going by my memory back in the day, but when you do these deep dives, you go, wow, look at that. There's another release I didn't know about. So it's kind of hidden, obviously. But, yeah, well, that's why I thought I'd ask if it was important or not. But there you go.
Yeah, I mean, my memory of that stuff's so hazy. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard any of those recordings for many, many years. It'd be probably quite interesting to sit down and listen again. But I mean, I just don't have them handy. I know I'm not. I guess I'm not one of those people that really. I don't know. I don't like to look backwards with my own stuff. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the music I listen to a lot of old records, but it's just I don't feel that way about things I've been involved in. You know.
I've already hinted at it, and you can tell I'm an old fan, okay, but your guitar playing is extremely important to the evolution of extreme metal, okay? Without you, you're one of about 5 or 6 guitarists where if you don't exist, all of extreme metal sounds different because of the ideas that you inspired in other people, if you like. So I'm not asking if you think of yourself in these terms or what have you, but... and I guess I've already asked the question, but you don't get a lot of questions about your legacy and your guitar playing and these old days that are so intensely interesting to someone like me at the age of 45. You're not getting a lot of those sort of questions?
Well, you do occasionally. When we finally got to release that last album, Torn Arteries, having sat on it for a year or two, I think I did 90 plus interviews. Over the course of all of that, you are going to get some questions, quite a lot of questions about the past, especially a band like us where there is, it stretches way back into ancient history practically. You will get some questions like that. And I think, as I mentioned, I don't really get asked much about Napalm. Because I was in the band so briefly. I think it's quite common to meet people who like Napalm, or you sometimes even be wearing the shirt or whatever, who had no idea that you were ever in the band.
Crazy.
Because it's a huge, a lot of time's passed and a lot of records. I mean, they've been out there working very hard for a number of years. So
yeah.
So it's more questions about the Carcass past, and sometimes you get some pretty funny ones, like people will ask you really earnestly, why did you change from grindcore to death metal?
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
And I'll be like, well, we never really self-described as grindcore, I mean, it just, but to some people, these terms are very real, concrete things, and it's meaningful. It's like, we did something that they think is very odd, and maybe not a good thing, in fact, and they just want to know why.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to put that into words. It's just like we were just doing the music that we felt like doing at any given time.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a good thing from the perspective that they're passionate, so they really love the music and the music you created in one of your epochs.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you just got to take that stuff on the chin, because sometimes out of the blue, someone will come up, just wanted to say, I love the first record. Can't stand anything else you ever did, but that first record is incredible.
Yeah, you get that. Yeah, I definitely take the view that you got to invest in an artist and actually go on the journey. And I've done that with Carcass. I've done that. Well, as soon as I heard you guys, I'll never forget having your poster on my wall back in '93 when you toured Australia. I remember that.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And
so that was the first time we went. Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the time when I thought extreme metal peaked in Australia before it came back in the mid 2000s. And you guys coming over and selling out, I think whether you sold out or not, but you were selling out Festival Hall, I think it was, in Brisbane, and Hordern Pavilion in Sydney, and there are a shitload of people at those gigs.
Yeah. I mean, we've always been quite spoiled with the audiences when we go down there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking forward to it anyway, because just as visitors, it's a fantastic place to go. But yeah, I mean, getting to do the gigs is just a lovely bonus, I guess.
Hey, I'll ask you, have I got time for one more question? Is that cool?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. Looking back on the deal in the United States with Columbia back in the day, there was 2 bands that were signed to majors, if I'm not mistaken. There was you guys and Morbid Angel. So the question, and I haven't thought, I mean, what other question could I ask really, but what would you do differently if you had your time over again with that major label experience?
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, the honest reflex answer would be nothing, because we were very set in our ways. We'd had complete liberty to make the album we wanted to make up to that point, with Earache. Dig just trusted his artists to do their thing.
Yeah.
So there was no label interference. So when the Columbia thing came about, I mean, firstly, it was surreal because it was something we'd never hoped for. It was just never imagined by any of us. But then it sort of landed in our laps, and we were like, I guess let's see what happens with this. So yeah, I mean, I think the first couple of months or whatever, it all looked quite optimistic, and they seemed to be making an effort with promoting artwork. But really, as has been discussed many times in the past, when things really started to go south was when we began work on the next record, the record that eventually became Swan Song and came out after we broke up. That's really when, while we're in the studio, you could feel it,
Yeah.
Things had changed. The dynamic between the band and the label had changed.
Did you have Morbid Angel? Famously, I've always had the guiding hand of Gunter Ford. Do you think if you'd had someone like Gunter, things would have been drastically different?
Again, that's really hard one to answer because it's a what if that's close to impossible. Because we didn't know the guy at all. And also, we were such different characters from Morbid Angel. We come from a very different kind of culture and background.
Yeah.
They were very ambitious guys, And back then, especially when they first kind of came to Europe and started playing, they were, quote unquote professional. The rest of us looked like a shower. Really, it was very amateurish kind of DIY vibe, which had its own charm.
Yeah.
But we were aware that playing on a tour with them, there's 3 bands that are kind of the DIY vibe, and then there's Morbid Angel being what we consider to be ultra professional.
Yeah.
But I mean, in that era, we did have a manager. We had Martin Nesbitt, who, along the way did some very cool things, made some good decisions. And also, in a way, he was, Jeff was doing some management through Martin. Jeff was on the phone to him constantly. And as we now know, Jeff became the manager once we reformed. So it's like, he's been kind of running the whole thing ever since.
He has been. Yeah, you guys, I have had one conversation with Jeff, and I'll be completely honest, it's nowhere near as enjoyable, or I don't get as much out of talking to him as I do to you. I'll be frank.
Well, I mean, it depends when you catch the guy, I guess with all of us really. But, I think sometimes he quite enjoys, just testing people, being abrasive, seeing how that flies. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
He's an interesting guy. He doesn't take a compliment well, I'll say that. That's my one takeaway from talking to Jeff. And
yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I consider, it's not just me, by the way. There's a whole raft of us who were around back in those days who are aware of your importance. Particularly the whole British grind thing is a landmark genre. It's like the Floridian death metal thing. There's really there's 3 genres ultimately from which everything is inspired by. There's British grind, Floridian death metal, and the Swedish scene. And Norwegian black metal too. You've got to throw them in,
yep.
Of course. Okay, so the 4 scenes. And you guys are a foundation band, and you in particular being the guitarist that's in 2 of, arguably, I mean, if you'd been in Bolt Throw, you would have been in all of the bands that you needed to be in to be in the most important bands that have inspired everybody and everything. So there's really, that's what. So when I'm giving you a compliment, it's really around that and around the inspiration that. See, I think people are going to be picking up your albums in 100 years' time, and there's going to be seminars and schools and people wanting, how do I play like Bill? This type of thing. I actually think it's going to be that important, and I believe I'll be proven right in the fullness of time. Not that we're going to be around to see it, but I believe that's what's going to happen.
No. Yeah, well, I mean, anything's possible. It really is. Because, I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation now, today in 2024, is remarkable. You know, if you were to ask me about the possibilities of such a thing when I was 17. So it's already outlasted anybody's expectations, you know, from the old days. I think all of us are amazed that the music still has this much value.
Yeah, it's been very important. Yeah, it's been very important. I was talking to Nick Barker about this, and you know what he did, and Stuart Anstis and those guys in Cradle as well. And it's very important what you did, because when we were teenagers, we felt, a lot of us felt aimless. Let's face it. We didn't feel as though there was a future much beyond the albums that we were listening to. Music was our friend, and I believe there's a whole bunch of people like of my vintage that feel the same way. And because of that, we're very passionate about the music, like what I was saying to Nick. And it is very important what you've done, though, Bill. I think I want you to know that you never know. Yeah, you never know who you've saved and what how you've inspired people, really, because people have gone on and become lawyers and doctors and nurses and, you know, captains of industry and all this sort of stuff, or they've become factory workers, whatever, you know. But the thing is that we've all gone through that period, and Carcass and bands like Carcass have been the soundtrack to our youth, and you can't ever take that back. Yeah, well, I mean, that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, it's lovely if you meet somebody and you can tell that some records that you've been involved in have meant a lot to them. You know, I mean, music's just a magical thing. It's just never ending. Just, you know, people change, musicians change, but a recording lasts forever and takes on a life of its own, I guess. I am writing a book for a fairly well-known black metal guitarist, Norwegian black metal guitarist at the moment. But when's yours coming out, mate? Because you would have a heck of a story to share. Well, I mean, I don't anticipate writing one anytime soon, let's put it that way. I mean, one thing a bunch of us have discussed, I mean, myself and a few other people of my vintage, you know, from bands, one thing we've discussed in the past is, in order to write a truly interesting book, a book about this kind of thing, you'd have to tell some stories that aren't very flattering. It's one thing if it's a story that shows you up in a bad light. If it's yourself, that's fine. But sometimes you can be telling stories that involve other people, and that's really dodgy territory, because often they won't want you to tell those stories. So then you'd be in a situation where you're having to contact a whole bunch of people and say, do you mind if I, you know, tell this anecdote? And probably that they wouldn't be cool with it, you know? So I just feel like, I don't know if the world needs like a really kind of sanitized account of that era. There probably is one out there already, and there's going to be more, but, you know, I'd rather not be the one responsible for it, you know? Well, I might be writing the book where that changes the game, to be quite honest with you, because the last conversation I had with the subject himself was about that very topic, and he was sharing with me that his wife was reading what I've written so far and said, you know, this is going to put the bomb under a few people. And my only response is, as long as it's the truth, my view is you've got nothing to worry about. If you tell the truth, yes, people will be annoyed, they'll be upset, probably hurt, but telling the truth is very important. Yeah, and also it's. I mean, when you do something like this, it's an account. I mean, you know, it's as definitive as you can make it, or as the person, you know, believes it to be so, or whatever. But it's just one account, and there will be many others. I mean, probably one thing I've had to sort of accept over the years is sometimes you'll read things about yourself that just. It's not just that you don't agree with them because, you know, they're not too pleasant, but sometimes there'll be things that are actually factually incorrect. Yeah. You know, about he was doing this in this place at that time, and you're like, no, I remember that. I wasn't. You know, I've read that, you know, I don't know, for example, like, I was at university when I was in Napalm. I mean, I never went to university. Oh, wow. I didn't even finish my education. You know, but, you know, just little things like that. And when I was younger, they bend you out of shape because, like, I want the truth to be known. I want the, you know, the correct account to be known. And after a while, you realize you just can't control those things. I mean, your average Wikipedia page is just riddled with inaccuracies, but you have to just get used to that. And I believe that's where books are so important, because they are the tool, they are the device, the instrument that allows you to set the record straight.
Absolutely. And I think one thing with books, as you said, I mean, done well, they do provide something very valuable. Because for the really serious fan, they are going to get the book and they're going to read the book. Something like Wikipedia is a little bit more a part of our kind of like soundbite culture, where, people haven't got the longest attention spans and it's just a quick glance at something and I've got that, let's move on. But when you pick up a music biography, as many, I mean, I'm one of those people that just read loads of them.
Yeah, same.
Within the first couple of sentences, you can tell how serious a book this is going to be.
I agree absolutely with that. If they lead with a hell of a story up front and it gets the hooks into you within sort of 2 or 3 pages, mate, you've got a companion for the next few days. That's how long it takes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you read Shane's book at all, Shane Embury's book?
No, I've yet to read it. I mean, I'm obviously like any kind of friend of his from the past, I'd be quite curious to. Have you?
Not yet. It's on my. I'm just listening to Tony Iommi's. I know it's been out there for a long time, but his biography. I'm listening to that on Audible at the moment. But I'll do that one next. But I want to read that one. I won't. I'm busy with kids and life and all the usual stuff at the moment. And I tend to start reading a book, and within about 3 minutes, I'm asleep, and I wake up and the light's still on, and my phone's playing some music I don't remember putting on, and I'm like, okay. But no, I'm keen to read it, but I'm really keen for your book to come out, though, at some point, too. I really hope that happens, mate.
Oh, thank you. That's nice. I mean, maybe I'll find a different angle on everything and a way to do something like that. But at the moment, I don't really see it. I'm quite content to read other people's books, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just, who can predict the future?
I know. There's a temptation. I've asked that question a lot, and the most common response is, well, I'm not done yet. And I go, I understand that. But the problem is the memories of when, to your point earlier in our chat, when you're 18 and 19, mate, they're getting further in the rearview mirror. So that's where the truth thing comes into play, and you just want to have the most vivid memory you can have, because life is long and can be, 1 year can feel like a decade in some respects, and you never know what the future holds in that way. Yeah, well, I mean,
I think somebody used this analogy in the past. If you look at something like witnessing a car accident, just in the hours following and the days following, the people that witnessed it will have slightly different accounts of what took place and how it happened. And I mean, the longer time goes by, the worse it gets. But sometimes in a book that can be kind of amusing in its own way. I mean, there was a book that came out a little while ago called Denim and Leather about the new wave of British heavy metal. Mm-hmm. It's written by this guy called Michael Amott, and the way he did it it's a bit like that Aerosmith book Walk This Way, or the Motley Crue book, The Dirt, where it's just the narrative is driven by the people who are there. So there's very little writing that isn't just dialogue. So it bounces from person to person, and that's what leads to some really hilarious stuff, because, I mean, it's so long ago, and people got wildly different versions of events. But that's part of the kind of the appeal of the book, I think.
Yeah, and I know, just as an adjacent point, I couldn't imagine that your story or Carcass's or Napalm Death story would mirror what goes on in Motley Crue, but Stranger Things, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that was the other reason why I said I'd be reluctant to do anything resembling an autobiography. It's just it would be so mundane for the most part. Yep. I mean, if only people knew how boring most of our touring life is. I mean, it's just not exciting, Yeah. I mean, here and there you might have, the odd night where it's a bit wild, but yeah, I mean, basically it's just mind-numbing repetition, and then you get to have an hour on stage. That's, everything is geared towards that hour, but what leads up to it tends to be just, a lot of dead time. You have to find something good to do with that time. you know.
How did you guys? Yeah, reading's one way, but look, when you're on the road as often as you are, and God knows I've heard so many accounts of how people pass the time, and a lot of it does involve heavy alcohol use and drug use. How did you guys avoid that?
Well, I mean, some of us in the band are drinkers, but I guess I hope it's safe to say we probably don't have like one of those like really ostentatious, heavy drinking, you know, animal kind of reputations. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I mean, obviously, the more time goes by, the more you start to realize there are limits to these things. You know, like doing a gig, just feeling like death is. You know, you can get through it, but you just realize very certain times you can sort of pull that kind of stunt. And yeah, you know, sometimes your body just completely gives up on you. So
yeah, very true.
Yeah. I'd say, you know, we're probably, you know, veering more towards the sensible these days. And yeah, we all know some bands where that, you know, there's a figure or at least a couple of figures sometimes where, you know, they are really just full-on 3D party animals. And I guess pretty much everyone in our band is a little bit too quiet for that.
Yeah, I've given up completely. I play every weekend covers, and even just doing that, I used to come home and hit the bottle of vodka, because you can't drink and drive, obviously, so I'd come home and it'd be 3:30 in the morning, but it was bloody surprising how quickly you could get through half a bottle or 3/4 of a bottle in the space of an hour or 2 hours where you put your mind to it. And but the hangovers and just the brutality of trying to recover from it, the older I got, was just not worth it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is when you're young, like, I mean, hangovers are horrible when you're a young guy, but like, I think it's still a relatively new thing. And, you know, can almost be funny in some ways. But, you know, but then say 15, 20 years on from that, it's just, oh God, you know, the sheer repetition. I mean, there's nothing fresh or amusing about it. You know?
No.
So, yeah.
No, especially when you got airports and traveling and then delayed, you got to sit in I was only stuck in Miami airport for 3 hours or something like that, and that was enough. But I couldn't imagine you guys have probably been stuck in airports overnight.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been a fair bit of that. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, you've got to. I feel like you've got to have a book with you because, you know, if you're suddenly stranded somewhere for hours and there's nothing to do, it's just a good way to pass the time. Keep your brain agile.
Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah. Well, April, mate, that's when you're coming down, isn't it? So I'll certainly be in the crowd. Yeah. It's I think they're going to be very close to sellouts, particularly in Melbourne and Perth. Those two cities, probably Adelaide as well. Although sometimes Adelaide can be a bit interesting, but I hope Brisbane is. I'm not sure where you're playing in Brisbane. I'll have to check. Actually, I'll check that now. Where are we? You are playing in the Prince's Theatre, which I've literally never been to. So hopefully it's a good venue. It's on the south side somewhere. So
great.
I'll raise a Coca-Cola in your honour, mate, when you're playing. There you go.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, yeah, it'd be good to see you if you're around. Yeah, please drop by.
Yeah, I'll see what we can arrange, mate. I never want to bug the bands too much when you're so busy because I know you've got a lot of punishers and people who want to hang out with you after their 17th beer and stuff, and I never want to be that guy. Not that I drink these days, as I say, but yeah, I tend to sort of chances of me seeing you from a distance and giving you a hoi hoi that way, mate, are probably more likely than meeting face to face. But I really appreciate it either way, mate. Yeah, just grateful that you're coming down and making the effort.
Oh yeah, well, we're just grateful for the opportunity. Yeah, it's been a long time coming for us. You know, we were almost there just before the pandemic struck. You know, everything was booked, flights, the lot. And then, we, kind of...
Yeah, that's when we last spoke. Yeah, it was 4 years ago, 4 years ago then. Yeah, it was the whole world ground to a bloody halt, didn't it? And slowly came back out. Now it's come back out swinging.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, it feels like... I think there's still some elements of like life that are still recovering.
Some deliveries.
There's going to be a lot of books written and a lot of documentaries made about that era. I think it's too fresh now for some people to look at it coldly. I think. Yeah,
and confronting. Confronting for a lot of people too. A lot of people.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, a lot of people that were, and I can tell you, I've lost friendships over it who were so pro lockdown. They were talking about euthanizing people that didn't get the vaccine, and it's just, it was virtually, it was total dystopian bullshit that some of these people were carrying on with.
I do remember some of that. I mean, the example you stated there is, that's outlandish. But I do remember seeing and hearing things that weren't far off that around the time. You're right. It brought out an incredibly ugly authoritarian streak in some people.
Yeah, particularly in Melbourne, great city, but holy shit. Like longest lockdown in the Western Hemisphere, and I know a bunch of people. My show outside of I get most of my listeners are in the UK and US, but in Australia it's by far Melbourne or Victoria, I should say, but really that'd be Melbourne. And I remember saying I just really feel for you guys right now being locked down for it was a couple of months on end. Couldn't remember the exact time, but that they put up with it too. But then they said, well, what did we have to do, mate? Nobody knew any better. But, I suppose.
Yeah. It's just so much to absorb, the whole thing. We just lived through a very, very bizarre episode in the history of Western civilization, I guess. It's incomparable. I just can't think of anything else you could compare it to, really. Because, living through a war is horrific, but this was, this was a totally different thing, but very challenging for human nature.
Yeah, I didn't like what it brought out in people, and as always, there was somebody out there, it was probably a comedian, it usually is, but summarised it all, and I'm going to totally fuck up the quote, but it was something like, it wasn't that lockdowns happened, it was what people did to each other to enforce the lockdowns, the dobbing into police and people ringing up police about Facebook posts and all this bullshit that was going on that just made me think, what are we doing with each other? Are we that godless that we've lost our humanity? People...
Yeah. Well, I think quite possibly. Everyone's got different psychological makeup, but it did seem as if some people, it just brought out some kind of latent misanthropic tendencies, people who probably didn't have the highest view of humanity to begin with, and now all of their fears about strangers are validated, and I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. It brought out a real bigoted, xenophobic streak in people that claimed to be very liberal or progressive, and it was. You can absolutely see how in these authoritarian regimes like North Korea, or when it was Nazi Germany, or Stalinist Russia, or even worse than them, Pol Pot's Cambodia, how people would dob on each other to make sure that they weren't the ones at the bottom of the pile, effectively, and where it goes to. And I know people weren't, en masse I'm talking about, they weren't killing each other or what have you, or governments weren't doing that. But it's you can see the underlying philosophy about how these things, they spring forth, how they evolve from that.
Exactly. And it's almost like it became uncontrollable. It's like, it just took on a life of its own.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if you've heard of this writer. It's like from I'm trying to think. He wrote a story called "The Machine Stops." His name's E.M. Forster, and it's from roughly a century ago. Mm-hmm. But it's a completely bizarre story because it predicts so many things that we've lived through in recent years. Convenience culture, internet culture, people's isolation. The whole kind of lockdown episode, all of that is in this. It's not even a book; it's like a short story that you can get in a very small paperback. But it just gave me the creeps just reading it. It's like it was eerie how he predicted all of these things. But I think really what it was is he's just I'm guessing the man was a very good observer of human nature, and so rather than being some kind of science fiction genius, because it's not really a science fiction book, it's something really heavy and existential. But you could almost go through, paragraph after paragraph. You could just take notes like, that was something predicted, and that came to pass. And remarkable.
Yeah, it's awful. Along with Yuri Bezmenov, the KGB agent that defected to the US in the 1980s, and things that he's on the TV in the 80s talking about things that, for all intents and purposes, could be right now in 2024. And I listened to him speak. So people have predicted this stuff. That it is, to your point, and a very good point you've raised there about human nature. We are predictable. It's just the right circumstances need to be present. The right conditions need to be present. And we're malleable in that way. But it was just,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously people have been quoting George Orwell a hell of a lot, the last couple of years, particularly. But, that thing, I've forgotten the exact phrase he used, but essentially he was saying people shouldn't really be using the distinctions of left and right in politics. It's really about authoritarian versus libertarian.
That is so true. Yeah, that is so very true. Look, I've had people, even like guests on the show, accuse me of being a Trump supporter. It's like, look, what? Just because I'm against authoritarianism, it doesn't mean you run toward Trump. I'm quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. Okay, meaning that I don't. To your point about left and right. Okay, so just to be 100% clear, Trump supported the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns. Okay, so before people start jumping up and down and saying he's there for freedom or what have you, he was part of the party politic that actually was the machine behind this stuff too. He might have just been going along with it or what have you, but before people start making baseless accusations, which I don't even find it an accusation, he's just a presidential candidate, for God's sake. I don't see him as anything more or less than that. But it's just gotten so crazy, hasn't it, where there's no nuance to the debate anymore. There's no the ability, and you know bloody what it's like. Just about everybody I've ever been in a van with has been a hardcore lefty, yet we could get along until recently. And everything just got thrown up in the air, and you're the devil or something unless you bind all of these progressive talking points.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of where we're at the moment. It's quite sad because, as you say, I can definitely remember a time not that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago now, when best friends would have different political opinions. They'd vote differently, they'd support different football teams. But they were able to be friends. You don't really see as much of that now. I'm sure it's still out there somewhere, but it's a real pity. Things are so divisive.
The postmodern influence on the education systems, particularly the liberal arts departments. And look, I'm an arts graduate. I'm a journalist, so. But I didn't get any of that. I didn't get that type of indoctrination. It was just as long as you could argue a point using academic rigor, okay, so putting it through the instrument of academic rigor, as long as you could do that, it was okay. Well, okay, and then there are some arguments that aren't worth having, of course, but you'd pass your essay or what have you. But it just seems nowadays like as if you're not espousing certain talking points and not behind the machine, then you're cancelled or you've invalid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I don't know. I guess I'll find out shortly how it is there these days. But living in a city like London, it often feels like pretty much every public space is being politicised now. So if you're getting public transport, particularly the tube, but to a degree buses as well, every space that previously would have been just advertising, which is kind of annoying enough as it is, but now you kind of yearn for the days of just pure advertising because so much of this stuff has just been replaced with some kind of political messaging. Now, sometimes you might agree with the thrust of it, but it becomes quite tedious after a while because it just feels like one protracted moral lecture as soon as you get on the tube or get on a bus. Or even the New Year's Eve fireworks, it's like, we've got to bring politics into this. It's just... I think for those people who don't feel that way, it's just going to send them the other direction. You're not going to educate people or convert them by those means, as far as I can tell.
No. Well, have you know how far it's gone now? You've heard of Google Gemini, the AI machine, the AI app.
Yeah.
So Joe Rogan's had guests on the show, and they've and I don't think it was his guest or him that discovered this. It was other people. But if you try to get Google Gemini to draw or conjure or create people who historically would be from Western European backgrounds, i.e. Nazi Germans, it won't do it. It puts black people in there. It's nuts. That's how crazy and how woke it's gone. It's like history, you can't avoid telling the truth with history, because if you do, people forget the lessons of the past. And that's what happens. And all of a sudden, it's like, so what are you saying? You're saying that black people were a part of the SS, because that's what this thing is conjuring. That's what this thing is drawing. So its bias has gone so far, it's come full circle to the point where it makes no sense, but it's propaganda is another thing, but it's actually going against the very thing that it's trying to propagate.
Yeah. I mean, that particular example is just surreal, isn't it?
It's very, very strange. I've tried to use it for a couple of things, just for shits and giggles, nothing professional. And it's pretty stupid. But then Dahlia's not that great either. You can tell straight away when this stuff's been generated artificially. I don't know if you've seen the recent Deicide have got a new album out or coming out. Anyway, that cover's been artificially generated, I understand. And it looks like shit. It looks terrible. You can tell straight away. It's not even good art. It just looks like it's like a Transformer movie. It's CGI. It's CGI to movies. Wow. It's to what CGI is to movies. It just looks terrible, and you can't look at it for too long. It doesn't have any of that visceral nature of the artwork that you guys produce or that photographers use, and it doesn't seem to be bound up with the music. It's just, we've got to have an album cover, so here's this.
Wow, goodness me. No, I haven't seen it, but I'm quite curious now. Yeah.
Check it out. Yeah, it's in line with their imagery, no doubt. It just feels fake. And that was the last word I would ever have associated with that great band. So, there you go.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a big subject right now. AI. Maybe the subject. I don't know. I mean, you do read horrific predictions of where it's leading, but I try not to dwell on that too much.
Yeah. Look, I do use it in my job in the day-to-day as a journo, but only refining some things. I don't use it to generate content. That's for bloody sure, because I can tell instantly. I deal with some marketing companies that send stuff that's been, they say they've written it, but I go, you haven't written it. ChatGPT's done this. It's silly. You can tell straight away. It's just a shit.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. Well, it's been fantastic to chat to you, mate. Thank you very much for giving me so much of your time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. No worries, mate. Well, God bless, and see you down here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
100%. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Man.
So not just an epic guitarist, a fellow who's loaded with common sense. It's always a joy to talk to the great Bill Steer, one of the writers of the greatest riffs in extreme metal, no question about that. One of the foundation guitarists. Without him, extreme metal evolves. It evolves differently. There you go. All right, there are more chats just like the one with Bill. There's a few more with Bill, as a matter of fact, over at scarsandguitars.com. Please do subscribe to the page if you're interested. I don't usually say that, but I think my audience it's getting deeper. It's thinning around the edges, but it's getting deeper based on the messages that I'm receiving. There are plenty of conversations with Cradle of Filth acolytes and alumni as well. If you're into that sort of thing, there's over a dozen, I think, at this point. Yeah, check them out. The YouTube channel's growing. It's all happening. I appreciate that like-minded souls are finding the conversations that I dearly enjoy participating in. All right, my name's Andrew Mackay Smith, and I'm the host of this show, Scars and Guitars. Until the next one, it's a very goodbye for now.